I would like to start off with an epigram. Uh, when lawyers are young, they want to get on. When they get a little older, they want to get honor. But when they get older, still older, they become honest. I was born, as you say, in 1932, but my birth will not be put in perspective unless I say something about my parents. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, his name was T.V. Trivandrum Venkateshwara, Iyer, and he was born in Trivandrum. He was a council, Maharaja's council, well, rather like King's council, justice in Kerala then flowed from the ruler, and then they were provided a specified testimonial entitling them to plead in the Maharaja's courts. And he was a very famous lawyer in his time. And the, he was pursuing a family tradition. And his children, his eldest son, Shankara, was a lawyer. My father should have been a lawyer, but he didn't want to go that way. He wanted to become an agriculturalist and then go to the Coimbatore College of Agriculture. My paternal grandfather wanted him to go into the law college in Madras, and to escape that, uh, he got onto a ship and disappeared. Now I'll come back to that in a while. Uh, he Child marriages were quite common at that time. My dad was born in 1905. My mother was born in 1911, and at the tender age of 9, this is in 1919, just after the First World War, there was an arranged marriage between my father and my mother, whose only misdemeanor, if you like, was to be born to a man whose name was also Venkateshwara, but he was not from Trivandrum, he was from Tirunelveli, Tinnevelly in those days. And after that marriage, the child marriage, there were no nuptials or anything because of the age of the thing. And the marriage just, you know, it didn't get consummated because before they came of age and passed on to puberty and all that, dad disappeared and he took a steamer from Madras and came to Penang. I think the year was 1926 or 27, and a hunt was set up to locate where my father had disappeared to, and eventually a police report was received in Madras to say that a person by that name has been located in Penang. So a search team was sent to twinkle him out, my mother's eldest brother and two other people. And they came to Penang and found him and told him that, look, you can't run away from these things. Your wife is waiting there. So he was possibly, taken back to India, made to, face my grandfather, who forgave him his thing, and he said, look, if you don't want to be a lawyer here, I think, but uh, my dad was insistent that he should be allowed to come back to Malaysia. So my mother joined him in 1929, and here comes another part of the story. In Malaysia at that time, just after the First World War, the colonial government, they had to find people to run the establishment. So there were only about a few hundred of them, the British, English, or Scottish officers, Irish too at the time. And for the railway industry, they brought in, most of them were English educated, secondary or primary educated, Jaffna Tamils, not Singlish, Jaffna Tamils. and they were secreted into the railway industry, or from that thing. And from Tumpat, where the Malayan Railway ran, the most northern station, right up to Johor, and there was a connecting thing in Gimas, where the line bifurcated. Every station master, every station master was a Jaffna. Now, as far as the plantation industry is concerned, rubber had taken hold. It was just before the First World War began. The name of the man there is Ridley. I'm not going to go into that now. But to supervise the Tamil laborers who were brought in from South India, they brought in a senior cadre of people to look after them, give them orders and push them around. And they were all from Kerala. Most of all, in fact, I would say all of them. And all Malaysian Estate Staff Union. The Tamils had a national union of plantation workers. So this was the situation there. But now comes the thing, to provide for a coming generation of government servants, the British opened a number of government schools. The first was the Penang Free School. This was started in 1898. The VI came in with Queen Victoria, so that would have been going to about 1894 for a jubilee. And in this situation, government quarters, the first set of government quarters was in Sentul, almost entirely housed by the Jaffna Tamils. The second was in Chinatown Street in Brickfields, again to provide for people in the railway stations and the goods yard and so on. So they were housed in government quarters in Brickfields, particularly Chinatown Street and Tambi Abdullah Road. And now the teachers, most of the teachers, in fact, the cream of the English education in Malay at that time was provided by Malayalis. And the first lot of houses for teachers, I'm not talking about the railway or the estates, these people they had uh, houses specially built for them. So the Imbi Road area, all those houses were for teachers in primary and secondary English schools. Now, the government servants, like my father and the people who were clerks in government offices and so on, they had to have houses built for them. And that lot of houses came up in the Peel Road area. Now, in the Peel Road area was called the Chinese Cantonese expression for 100 quarters. But 100 quarters was also applied to the Brickfields area. Now, that when we went into the Peel Road area, it was primary jungle. Primary jungle. So the first lot of houses that were built there were called Class 9, and you entered the house up 3 steps, and then there was a lounge cum sitting room, one single room. You went down into the outhouse at the back where the kitchen was located and a toilet, and this was what was called a Japanese toilet, not a flush, with the bucket system was in use. And that lot of things were built in Shelley Road, Cochrane Road, and Peel Square. They were all class 9. And the completion of that was 1929, 1930. And my father had come back by then. And his story, he started off in Penang. In fact, the first house where he took refuge was the house of K.G. George's wife's parents. George subsequently became our Registrar of Trade Unions. The Chandrarood Dam, he was there for a short while, and then he came to Ipoh, where he was working in either Lewis and Company or Maxwell Kenyon Cowdy and Jones. He spoke very good English. He could also write very good English, and he could also type quite quickly. And he typed the submission for either Huntsman or Lewis, I can't remember now. And when he appeared in the Ipoh High Court and submitted the paper, the judge asked him, "Who did this for you?" So he said, "Oh, we have a clerk in the office by the name of Mahadevan." He said, "Send him to me." So my father went to him, the judge. I can't remember his name now. This was in 1929. And he told my dad, "Pack up your bags and you're coming with me to KL." So he said, but he said, "No, pack up your bags, you're coming with me to KL." So that's how my father started. He was press ganged into the service and he became the private secretary to the Chief Justice. The reason why I mentioned all of this is that because of his position in government, that first house he occupied in Peel Square was where my elder brother was born in 1931. And the midwife who attended to him was a Mrs. Vedavanam, well known. I'll come back to her later. And when my dad got a promotion in 1932, he moved to a class 8 house, which was in Peel Avenue, and it was in that house that I was born. There were 8 houses in that block. There were 2 blocks in front of us on the other side of the road, and in one of them was Ali Mama, that's what we called him. He subsequently became the Registrar of Citizens. His eldest boy was Ibrahim Ali, who won the Queen's Scholarship in BI and went off to England. And the eldest daughter, Saleha, I went to kindergarten. My kindergarten was in St. Mary's in 1937. And the end of term, I witnessed Saleha getting a school certificate. And there were others there, but she was particularly notable. And in 1930, that was 37, I came out of kindergarten, was put into Pasar Road School in 1939, government school. All the government schools were built in the shape of an E, to say English school. And the Pasar Road School was also there for government. Unfortunately, my father met with a serious traffic accident in 32. In fact, at that time, he used to visit the house of Chaco's grandfather, who was then a teacher in Bentong, and they used to meet in their house in Klang. And there was a group photograph taken there with my father in it. I think that photograph is still there. But they used to go to Morin for their outing for seaside, and on the way back, my father fell from his motorcycle. They didn't notice him missing. Then for about 3 months, he was in hospital. He was unconscious. When he came out of it, he had lost his sense of smell. And when I was born, again, Mrs. Vedavanam was my mother's midwife, and I had a I had a problem because uh, for the first 5 years of my life, I couldn't walk. I used to crawl around on all fours, and most of the time I was stuck in a cradle. But I became very observant, of what was going on around me, and that might explain why I seem to have a memory which is far better than most other people. Once I saw something on paper, it had a photographic memory. I never forgot that. And the other thing was seeing what people did. So to come back to this thing, I didn't start walking after a fashion until I went to that in the 1935 or 36. But by 1939, uh, when I went into the Pasar Road School, my first teacher, Tan Pan Tai, my second teacher, Mrs. Sauce, and then the war broke out. Policy at that time was to install people into houses where they were kept away from their own community. So in our block, the next house was Raja Kale, the next house was Moiji Wek, next house Moi Liam Tu, next house N.K. Pillay, next teacher in the technical college, next house K.K. Nair, next house Lee Waiting, and the next house Buxton. Just an example that deliberate government policy, they did not have Indians and Indians, that as children we all played together, and I picked up a lot of Cantonese. I could pick up some Malay, of course, in the house because my mother was Tamil and my father was Malayali. I spoke both those languages, and that was the source of my multilingual capacity. Behind our house was marsh, Arthur Marsh, so that's the English part of it. When the war started, there was no notice, The Japanese just came and invaded Cotabaru, and the next thing we knew that they were coming to bomb the KL airport and whatnot, Penang and so on. The English bosses that we all had, including my father's boss at that time, Beckett Terrell was his name. It was all like a game to us, In fact, behind our house, I didn't know, right behind our house was a coconut estate. And beyond that was the jungle reserve, Utang Simpan. So inside the coconut estate, which was on the direct flight path to the airport, they had installed an anti-aircraft gun. And when the first wave of Japanese fighters or bombers came, they let fly. The Japanese bombs were 25 pounders or I don't know, very small bombs. But this explosion behind our house was deafening and the windows started to rattle. And that was in fact, that struck some terror into our house. But our Peel Avenue was on the main route to Singapore. All our neighbors left. Benedict Paul came to our house to persuade my father that we should run out to Singapore. We had a small car, baby Austin. My father refused. Paul set off on his own. We were left, and then the town became that place like a ghost town, nobody there. So my father decided to run as well. And where did he run? He came to, of all places, Glenmary Estate, where we are now living. There were 30 families, all Brahmins, and all occupied the bungalow of a Mr. Crawford, who was the manager of the Glenmary Estate at the time. And within 3 days, the women couldn't get along with each other. Each one wanted to be in the kitchen first. My mother went on strike and said, I can't live here. So we took shelter in Lorong Sipute, in the house of a Mr. Hariharan. During the war, I started to work at the age of 11 in a Japanese factory, Oki Denki, just next to the station. And then when the first bombing came in Sentul, I was moved to another factory, Tokyo Shibaura, which was Warren Brothers in Pudu Road. And I was a junior storekeeper with Samuel Nalaya. And then there were some losses of equipment, and I was getting ready to lose my head when the stock taking came in. And lucky, the atom bomb was dropped in Hiroshima on the 6th of August, and again in Nagasaki on the 9th. And Hashigawa, our boss, told us on the 12th to go home. 47, my father sent my brother and I back to India to tell the people there that we were not dead and that we were coming there to claim our property. But to come back to this thing, from 1946 onwards, my teacher then was Fernanda. I topped the list. In fact, with that memory of mine, English subjects and all that, I just walked through them. Mathematics, I was not so good. My brother came to the rescue, so I could do that as well. So on both sides, one mistake I made was that I was passionate about going to study medicine, and we had a Scottish teacher by the name of Hunter who pumped us with all those glamorous Irish stories of Robert Bruce and Bannockburn and you name it. So I said, no, I must go to Edinburgh to do my thing, and that would also have fulfilled my ambitious, my trial, what my gyan, my passion for travel. Now, because of my Japanese war experiences, all my friends were older than me. No, because I was 11 when I started working, 14 when I ended. But the people who were working with me, they were all 19, 20. And by 49, I had no friends of my own age. My friends were all sitting in Singapore. They were either in the medical university or the arts faculty. So my holidays were spent in Singapore, and I'm afraid that I had to witness the ragging there. It was barbaric. There's no way I was going to go and sing. So I shut my doors on that one. And then when my results came, of course, I'm again a double scholar there. And my father said, "You better take a scholarship, go to Singapore, you do your medicine." I was not having that. I was not having that. So I had to concoct some excuse to get away from Singapore and get to London, and I chose law. That's how I chose law, because there was no law faculty in Malaysia at the time. The only faculty for learning law was either Cambridge, Oxford, or the Inns of Court. And I told my father I changed my mind. I thought I was going to be severely punished. Instead of which, he went into ecstasies. And if I had gone for medicine, the family profession would have gone into oblivion. So he immediately, overnight, he organized my admission into the inner temple. I had to pass a Latin exam, qualified. I got through that in 3 months. The papers, the set got, I wrote up the answers in 15 minutes and then handed, when the teacher thought I'd given up, the invigilator, and he compelled me to sit there. But anyway, the long and the short of it is that once I got into England, I was delighted to be out of the country. I went in, started, I was living as a paying guest in a, in a, with a lady called Mrs. Lambert in Finsbury Park. And then my studies took me, I was quite quick about that as well. I finished my law exams in 20 months. I decided that I wanted to stay on. I've not, although I finished my bar exams, I had not yet been called to the bar because I was too young. You know, you had to be 21 years or to be called to the bar. I think there's some age barrier there. So from London, I went to Plymouth, and there I apprenticed myself to Foot and Bowden. This was a solicitor's firm which was started by the originator of the Liberal Party, Isaac Foot, and all his children became very distinguished. Hugh Foot, civil service, governor of Palestine, and so on, and later on in the UN. Michael Foot, leader of the Labour Party, and John Foot, later Lord John Foot. They were my mentors, and I learned a lot there. After I finished, I came back to London, 6 months in Plymouth, uh, many adventures in the country. And then in London, I was Dinglefoot had taken silk, so I couldn't join him. Called Sonny Rumford, the Commonwealth Secretariat, he became the number one there. I had to be content with a junior, Ingram Poole, commander of the Ark Royal ship, and he became my master, and I finished my pupillage with him and got called to the bar, and I came back to Malaysia in 1955. Became a partner at the age of 61. 1969, I was in Shearn Delamore until 1958. And then I had 6 months leave. I took my leave. I came back in 1959 and walked into Shearn's uh, as senior assistant police. So my second tour, I was now a senior assistant, and we were given a salary of 1,760 bucks, 50 bucks all in. That was a monthly salary, and I also had a travel allowance. I could live on that. So in 61, when I became a partner, very, very glamorous, all wonderful to be a partner. But what happened was that we had to pay the retiring partner, Peter Hall, the value of his goodwill. And his goodwill was 3 years' profits. and that came to 1,700,000. We had to settle by paying him by installments. So from the time I became a partner, I was forever in debt because although the money looked big, one chunk of it went to pay Peter, another chunk went to pay tax, and then what was I left with? In fact, financially, I was worse off, not better off than as an assistant, but it all evened up in the end. What happened was, in the course of this stay, uh, uh, I had already taken a role in the community. I was a much sought after speaker in weddings. For my Rotary thing, I started a home nursing campaign for nurses to go to the houses of poor people who couldn't afford to look after themselves. So I had that, and Margaret Chai was my first thing that I did. That I was right from the beginning. I was also uh, vice president of the zoo. We started off from scratch. We had to get sponsorship from the various trading companies. For example, our two giraffes were named after Malayan tobacco. They were called Tiga Lima. We imported animals from Africa, but my job there was purely as a human resource and to look after their unions because the unions were becoming very vociferous. So our vice president of the zoo, Kington Lou was a star there, and then we did all sorts of things. Douglas Dean were the other two I had to work with. Now, in addition to the zoo, there was something else that happened. Because our firm, Shearn Delamore, was the leading firm for all the agency houses. This was uh, James Warren. Oh God, I've forgotten their names, but Henry Waugh. That was on the trading side. Guthrie's, you know, Sime Darby's. Now then on the plantation side, I became the leading advisor in the Malayan Agricultural Producers Association, but very, very pro-European, because my clients are all these big agency houses and so on. They're the ones whom I was acting for. What then happened was that politically, M.N. Kumarasamy, who was a great friend of Tunku, he came to me when I just started in 56 and he said, Shankar, come on, I've spoken to Tunku, we want you to come and join the Foreign Service. So I said, look, I've just come back as a lawyer. Give me a chance, law. Let me practice this thing for a couple of years. He said, you want to do that? You will have no seniority by the time you come in. If you want to come in now, you'll be an ambassador. I said, no. I turned that down. So what happened now? In 59, on 59, I partner 61. This went on until the May the
13th.
13th trouble started. Before before the riots, because once the riots started, I volunteered for duty. Tuku had made a appeal for help, and I volunteered for duty. And then after that, I was swallowed up with government work, plus resettling refugees and the National Goodwill Council. Uh, when uh, Tunku did what he did on the 13th of May, we already had a running government. Um, Manika Vasagam was then the Minister of Labour, I think, or Minister of Labour. Akhil Johari was Minister for Education. I was assigned to them and I went to Federal House on the 14th to report for duty. They gave me a military escort. And what happened was that on the 15th, Razak uh, had declared an emergency. He had declared himself to be the Director of National Operations, and he called for a meeting in the Prime Minister's office. I was waiting at the door for them to arrive. Tunku passed by in a Cadillac, in big American car, face apparent, looked shrunken. He looked there and he saw me standing alone, and he just drove up the hill, turned the car around, came down and didn't come back. Sambandhan came, he wasn't given a seat. And what happened was that the people who attended that meeting, I was there as Monika's assistant, was the big oblong table. Rajat was sitting with someone who was a military man on his right, and then there was Tong Yao Hong, who was, I think, in KSU or something, sitting on his left. And for the long and the short of it, immediately after that meeting, it became obvious that Tunku's ministers, Sambandhan and the old guard, they had been marginalized. It was done very politely. They weren't told you are sacked. They were told that, look, the setup is such that you got no more place here. But Tunku's honor had to be retrieved. So he was appointed chairman of the National Goodwill Council, and we were put there to go and make peace, with the Chinese and the Malays, the extremists. And that was what happened there. So, but it was just window dressing, I'm afraid. But I think Chi then in that first meeting made a wonderful speech on national unity, all in Malay. Tan Chi Kung, oh God, what a hero! What a hero that guy! For I really worshipped him because he was a real Malaysian, and he had the respect both of the Malay and the Chinese community. The Indians were also ranks on the. Didn't really. They were really an appendage. When I started practice in KL, which would be from 61 onwards, our firm was also the in-house solicitors for the UK High Commission. So all the High Commission work, even from Solomon days, I was already doing their DAD claims and hirings and so on. So if any of their staff got into any kind of difficulty, we were the first choice. So now here is a story on the Lewis case. Now, since Kingsley Lewis was a client of mine, there are certain professional obligations that I owe to him about matters which might have come to me in confidence as his solicitor. What I'm going to narrate to you now is in the public domain and was also the subject of a book by Professor Chow Si Cheng, the renowned forensic pathologist in Singapore. That book is called Murder is My Business. Now, in this particular case, what happened was that Kingsley Lewis was actually from either Wolverhampton or Northampton. He was a rural English schoolboy, and after he passed his exams, he decided to join the Foreign Service. So he passed his Foreign Service exams, and his first posting was to Kenya. And the situation in a young bachelor uh, from an English background, rural background. So I think that he was in some ways he did not fully familiar with the toing and froing in cities. So that time, on one occasion, with a group of his pals, they went to a dance hall. And dance halls in Nairobi, as I understand it, were in the same way that we had dance halls in KL. The Eastern Cabaret was well known. The Bukit Bintang also had a dance hall, well known. And what you did there was you went to a counter and bought yourself a book of tickets. So the $2, there will be 10 tickets there, 20 cents each. And the dance hostesses were all up there for grabs. So they'll be sitting around the dance floor at tables, and if you fancied any particular one of them, you put your ticket there, and she had to get up and dance with you. And this is what happened. And the same thing in Nairobi. So there was a girl, young Kingsley fancied, and he started to dance with her. His pals danced with some other girls, and by the end of the night, they decided to invite two or three of them back to spend for a nightcap, if I can put it like that. And what then happened was that I think they might well have been high or drinking as well. And Kingsley was driving the car and he crashed it into a tree. The windscreen shattered, and I've forgotten the name of his lady. Uh, her face was quite severely cut up, and she admitted into hospital. Miraculously, nothing happened to Kingsley, no severe injuries, I think. And the next day or the day afterwards, when he went to visit her in hospital, she told him, "Look, you have deprived me of my livelihood. My face was my fortune, and now that you have done this to me, you have to marry me." Having a conscience and stricken with guilt, he married her, and I'm sorry I can't remember her name. One night, he went to hospital on a number of occasions. This didn't happen the next day, or if it did, I'm unaware of it. What I do know is that Kingsley remained in the High Commission for some months, and in that process, they did marry. They did marry each other, and they had a child. And this lady of his was the daughter of a father who was a game warden on the Ugandan-Kenya border. It was called the Ruwenzori National Park. And his wife was in fact a Congolese, from the Congo, as far as I understood. That these After the marriage and they had a child, that child's name they gave him was Jomo, after Jomo Kenyatta, then of the first Prime Minister of Kenya. And this situation, I think, led to uh, the transfer of Louis and family, wife and child, to KL. Now, the reasons for the transfer, officially, I have no idea. Unofficially, what the people thought was that for a white Englishman in Nairobi, in the embassy, uh, to be seen married to a native, I don't know, there might have been niceties involved there. So he came here. They came here, and he was still in the Colombo plan. I don't know where his office was, but it was somewhere in town. Uh, his house, the house that he rented out from a Malay landlord, and in that house there was Kingsley, there was his wife, and they had a son, Jomo, and there was also an Indian maid servant. I did not know this at the time. And then there was a neighbor was a man called Drummond, Englishman. There was another neighbor there who was a local lawyer, and I think his name was Ernest Devadasan. I think I've got the name correct. Ernest, in fact, subsequently told me that he was a regular visitor in that house, and from what he could see, there was nothing seriously amiss. Uh, Drummond had a very different story to tell uh, about the unconventional ways in which uh, the wife was conducting herself. And the long and the short of it is that somewhere down the line, the relationship between them must have gone very sour. what now comes to think that what figured in the trial was that Kingsley Lewis had gone to the China Emporium and there bought a chopper, a meat chopper. That chopper is more something that we would use in the kitchen,
Right.
But anyway, he got the chopper, he took it home. What his state of mind was, there's no direct evidence on that. But what did come out is that somewhere one night trouble arose, and in the course of it there was a fight, and then in physically she was as maybe much stronger than he was. She was a very powerfully built woman, small, fair. But in that fight, Kingsley sustained some blows, and the blows that he inflicted on his wife were fatal. And what he did was that when he realized the enormity of what he had done, he panicked, locked his wife up in a suitcase, and before he could, take it anywhere, it was a big suitcase, heavy thing. I'm sure that the commotion must have been such that the police got to know about it. And when they went to the house, Kingsley, well, I think he had admitted what he had done, or I've got to be a little sure of my facts here. He may or may not have said it, but it was obvious now. With a dead body in a suitcase, he was taken to the Brickfields Road police station, and overnight the news was all over town, all over town. And then the High Commission actually called our office, and in the first instance, Vincent Paul Raj, my assistant, he was the one who was initially taken into the case. And then after him, I was brought into it for the trial. There was, uh, in those days, there were jury trials. The prosecutor was Sambandamurthy, a very, very renowned prosecutor. He was also the holder of a George Medal for bravery during the communist operations in the jungle. The course of that trial, initial trial, we had to have a retrial because evidence in the course of a police investigation was not admissible as evidence. And in the heat of the moment, Sambandamurthy elicited evidence of what Kingsley had said under arrest, which was inadmissible. But since the jury was there, Harun Hashim was the judge, very fair, very fine judge. And I told the judge, look, the jury has already heard this inadmissible evidence. So what are we going to do? Well, we can't carry on with the trial. He agreed, and then we had a retrial. So from the date of the incident up to the date of the retrial, Kingsley was in custody for nearly about 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And 3 years or 4 years he was in custody. Now, in the trial itself, uh, well, Kingsley gave evidence that this thing had happened during a fight. His evidence was accepted by the court, and the Harun Hashim discharged the jury and convicted him of manslaughter and gave him a sentence of 5 years. But for good conduct, one third had been remitted. So he went back to jail, and there was only about 2 weeks, 2 weeks left for the sentence. And then in the 2 weeks, I traffic jams had already begun those days, living in Jalan Gurney. I went to jail to see him out. But before I could get there, he had already come out, and the High Commission was waiting there. They put him in a car, took him to the airport, and he had already left for England. When he was in England, he wrote me a thank you letter, yes, and he invited me to come and stay with him. He was very hospitable, very generous, but I didn't have any occasion to take advantage of his offer. And the story ends there. But at that time, well, we did not have TV and all that the way we have now. The entertainment in court proceedings was the thing of the day. And I'm afraid that although I prefer to do civil cases, this particular trial was sensational, really sensational. And well, along with it, my reputation, I suppose, you know, also grew. But I don't think I ever handled any murder case after that. What happened was that after that, uh, after 69, 70, 71, the emergency was lifted in 72 or 73. Parliament resumed, and Monica was appointed Minister of Labour, and he continued to take advice from me from time to time if he needed it. And then, out of the blue, this was in 1974 or 75, he nominated me as a board member on MAS, and I was put on the board, and that changed my life, completely changed my life, because from a legal practice, uh, I became a I had to study all the implications of air law and bilateral negotiations. And the people whom I met in the course of my directorship of MAS are outstanding. Was the chairman whom I had to serve, Tan Sri Rajamoha bin Badiu Zaman. Oh, what a flower of the Malay race that man was. Of course, I doted on him, and I treated him as a foster father. Now, the other piece of good luck I had was that after I joined Shearn's, the Medical Defence Union in England, they appointed Shearn's to be their lawyer through their solicitors Hampsons. So throughout my career, I was not only a lawyer for lawyers, but I became a specialist lawyer for medical cases, disciplinary offences, negligence, and so on. So I learned a lot of medicine that way, and also had a very intimate connection with the medical fraternity. The big case that was then going on, I subject to correction, the name would have been Lim Lian Biak. And this was a move to for Chinese schools to be exempted from teaching Malay. I remember there's a very big case there, and I was consulted by the then Attorney General on what could be said on that one. And oh yes, there was another incident where we lost a plane. There's a crash, MH673. Again, I'm a little uncertain about the date, but it might have been 1979 or 80. Wait a minute. Yes, that crash took place 1980. And being the in-house lawyer on board, I had to take charge of that case. And the Attorney General government side of the Malaysian Airlines was a government-owned company. So I then became in-house counsel for MAS, and then I had to settle the insurance claims and the claims for the passengers. All that I did.
Okay.
And by the way, I didn't charge anything for that. It was all done pro bono. MAS paid me a royal salary of $500 per month to sit on the board. Oh, God, that was really an honorarium. But to get back to this thing, it was at that point in time that Abu Talib came and asked me uh, to accept an offer as a judgeship. Usually that offer will come through the Chief Justice, but in this case it came through him, and I had all my children were then in England, their education fees and so on was not of a small order. It cost a lot of money. The judge's salary at that time, including all allowances, would have been, I think, 9,000 or 8,000 basic, and then other allowances. So it had come to about 13 or 14,000 a month. I could certainly not afford my lifestyle that way. But mercifully for me, I was on the verge of the children were all about to end their education. So I could take it. I could take the load. And so, oh yes, I also had the goodwill money for my partnership. So with that, and I was able to settle my tax liabilities, and I became a judge in 1983. And I was sent to Johor, and then I started in Johor on the first 31st of August to Merdeka, 2nd or 3rd of September, I remember. I thought that I thought that I had duty to repay to society. Malaysia had given me a lot. I mean, even though I think I of course I did my thing, but I had a keen sense of obligation, to the country. You know, so look for to come back to this thing. In '69, I was offered a judgeship in Singapore. I was in the middle of, settling all these refugees and this man who was an emissary of the Singapore government. I don't know that he was a minister there. And I told him, look, I'm sorry. You can see the situation in which my country is. I can't jettison the thing and come down and be a judge in Singapore. So he said, oh, so you're not coming. You see, why? I said, I love my country. And he said, I've never forgotten his words. He said, oh, you love your country. But what do you do if your country doesn't love you? Those were his words. You know, I said, never mind. I said, if my country doesn't love me, it doesn't matter. I still love my country. That's how I stayed. So that was the first offer I rejected. At that time there was no question of judges' pay and all that sort of thing. The money factor didn't enter into it at all. This was in 1969, sometime around 1976 or 77. H.T. Ong asked me, who was then the Chief Justice. H.T. Ong asked me, he said, Bill, would you like to become a judge? Then he said, his words were, you will never become a Chief Justice, but as a judge, you can write anything you like and try and reshape the law, the way you think it should go. I was stuck. No way I could have taken it up. Then I told him, I said, Chief, that on that kind of salary, I can't make my ends meet. You have to excuse me. Abu Talib's offer was the third time I was being offered. And by then I was financially, even though I can't claim to be a very rich man or anything like that, I was not uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable, and I had the mental satisfaction, that I had not neglected my duties to my nation. So that thing, and I'm unswervable on that. My love for Malaysia is, unconditional and total. Well, I had my golf, to which I was passionately addicted. In Johor, the great thing there was that Thursday afternoon was a holiday, Friday was a holiday, Saturday in Johor was your Monday in KL. The weekly holiday was different. So the result of this was that on Thursday, by about 12:30, when the court was about to rise, I already had my golf things packed in the boot, and I dashed into the car, and across the causeway I went, and I had the wonderful games of golf with my friend the Week in Week, who was then he was the director of the Singapore Broadcasting Corporation. He had been my client in KL, in the New Straits Times, in the Straits Times group. So we were very close personal friends. So Kimby and he'll be waiting for me. We played our golf. in the Singapore International Golf Club. That the evening only, we could only manage about 9 holes or something. The second place that I used to inhabit was the Singapore Cricket Club, where I used to go and watch cricket. Oh, by the way, by then, I should give notice that Yong Pak Hao has always been my mentor. At that time, he was in the OCBC. He was Tan Chin Tuan's chief CEO. But during my tenure, uh, I'm not sure that my timing may be a bit out. But the other place I also played golf was in Keppel. And think to cut a long story short, my weekends in Johor, Thursdays and Fridays, I was romping around with all my old khakis. My brother Joe Grimberg and I started in the law together. Pandit Selvam, who subsequently came in, I adopted him as my younger brother. In fact, we were brothers after that, adopted brothers. So, and of course, from the Kingsley Lewis case, the forensic laboratory in Singapore in Outram Road, I could go there, and that was where I got involved in an investigation into who killed Jack Kennedy. That investigation started there, because when the pathologist who had seen Kennedy's, he wasn't allowed to do the post-mortem. But after the Earl Warren report, he launched a campaign. Now, his name was Dr. Cyril Wecht, Wecht, a renowned pathologist. And he was a pal of a Japanese pathologist who did the Marilyn Monroe thing, Noguchi or some name like that in Hollywood. So this was another angle, because my medical interests were continued in parallel with my law and my judgeship. So I brought Shisheng and Cyril Wake on my invitation. They gave a lecture to the Singapore Bar and the Rotary Club on the implications of the Kennedy assassination. And then Dr. K.N. Singh, who is still there, he said, Judge, why don't we form a medical legal society here? That was the child. It just started there like that. And it continued. It continued because when I came back to KL, we brought in the Attorney General's Department as co-members in the society. And one of my ambitions then was to stop the hostility between lawyers and doctors. It's notorious, the lawyers who, I don't want to mention any name, but when a doctor comes to give evidence, they treat him like an enemy, not like a collaborator in the search for truth. That I wanted to stop that thing for once and for all. And I hope I succeeded. Mokhtar, the Attorney General at the time was Mokhtar. I can't remember his full name. He's passed on, poor fellow. And he was, I think he was co-chairman or deputy chairman. And then we split, on the board, we had 2 lawyers and 2 doctors, and then a secretary. The first secretary was Tansley now, Cecil Abraham, who may have succeeded me as president. I wouldn't swear to that. But that was that. So I think that apart from that, by becoming a consultant to Zaid Ibrahim Curial, I had to retire. There's no option to it. So when I retired from the Court of Appeal, the atmosphere of legal practice in Malaysia today is a totally different thing. Totally different thing. The first thing I want to say is that the judiciary is not a monolithic institution. Even at the time when I was a consultant, we already had 167 superior court judges, and then thousands of them, lower court judges, subordinate courts, and they all don't think as one. They are not a monolithic institution. Each person there has got his own ideas about how to handle the case. And now comes the next thing. When you got into this filing of filing of written submissions, the magic of advocacy went up in smoke. Where do you fellow go to a courtroom to hear, say, go, we had our stars, people like Kirpal Singh, Manjit Singh, Dylan. I gave a list of them in my book. Edgar Joseph also. These people were oracles, the way they stood up to talk. Everybody remained silent. That is all a thing of the past. And the judges are very severely overworked. We are given more work than we can handle. And in 14 days, when they are sitting, the thing starts piling up, and they are given another 14 days interval to write their judgment. How? How are you going to write a learned judgment if all the time you have to do it is within 14 days? And then bang comes this KPI, key performance indicator. So, like Yusuf Chin saying, I don't mind, bring the judgments to me in a bullock cart. I don't mind if it's not brought to me in a Rolls Royce. What he was saying on quality as a casualty. Sometimes, you can't simply write a judgment. You've got to give it some thought. So those are features which we have lost. And now we are in a situation where it's all paperwork. It's all a kind of vicarious thing. And you got to be brief. You got to have your punch point, bull point. You got to put them right in front. If you don't do that, and you submerge the judge in a wealth of detail, you've had it. So you ask yourself, well, if I take a cutoff point, I think that in the last, I'll go 10 years, have you seen one judgment in our reports which seriously analyzes some point of law and comes to a learned conclusion? I do not know of any. My father, who was all his life been private secretary, I invited him to come to Johor. He came. And before I could sit in the judge's seat, I told him, I said, Dad, look, all your life you sat on the other side of the table and the judge was sitting in front of you. Today it's going to be different. I'm going to be sitting where you are sitting. You sit in the judge's seat. Oh God, he was so overwhelmed. And then in the afternoon, he wrote me a letter. He wrote this thing. He said, look, Balan, what you did for me today is the summum bonum of my life. I had to go and check it, Summum bonum means the best, the summit of all the good that I have in my life is what you did for me today. So that is why I chose this title.